So then we are back with more understandings from the Renewed Covenant. This is from the Aramaic English translation of the Scriptures. Very important, gives us more solid understanding from what we didn't understand before. So then there is a very interesting topic regarding wrath, anger. It's a very important topic because it relates with the everyday relationships. It relates with our character before the Creator. And it shows many times when the Creator Himself came to clean up the camp, came then, and He began to teach the people the true understanding of the Scriptures. And we understand it from before. Takanot Maasim had quadruple, quintuple the entire set of laws, never intended it. So then sometimes the leaders would gnash at him in anger. In those areas we must be very cautious, because if we don't take a stand in the Scriptures and understand, we can gnash at people. It's amazing, the truth when it is spoken, the evil in people, they jump out of them. And they want to take over the person, slash in pieces, and in the spirit it can't be done. So then many times when we read in terms of Stephen, we understand he was in a temple, he was then expounding in the Scriptures, as many times we have done. He was being very thorough in the way he was explaining. And then when he came to the part of the Messiah, he said, you then murdered him. And then they gnashed at him because their understanding was then brought to light. From the time of Moshe and then through the entire history of the entire nation, then they were acquainted with then the Messiah and many areas where he would come from. And then when he came to the part of the Messiah, and then they were guilty of murdering him, they could not handle themselves and ended up murdering the person. He was brought outside to the corner and they stoned him to death. And Shaul was there. That's the most amazing part of it, in quote. Amazing because later then the Creator Himself had to change him. So then for murder, he was then a proclaimer. He was consenting while the person then, Stephen, was then stoned to death. He had pleasure in having Stephen or Stephen being stoned. He was a murderer. And then later he did understand. And sometimes it's not very easy. It is very sometimes tough. But what causes the problem is not the problem itself. It's the wrong learning. We were taught from another perspective of what the truth is. When the Bible was put together, they did not understand there was a second half coming. In other words, the autumn feast. They thought those areas, those feasts, those were done. A complete lie. They are absolutely stupid scoundrels of the worst kind that ever lived on the face of the earth. They don't understand biblical prophecy, biblical feasts. So every time you hear a preacher talking junk, simply turn your back and leave the building. Whatsoever they teach is junk. From those stupid pulpits, they are teaching you Greco-Roman stupidity. The Messiah came and he completed only half of it. That's when sometimes people they get angry. If you are in a gathering with pastors and teachers and these other scoundrels, begin to say in their faces, the Messiah came to complete only half of it. They gnash at you with such an anger you would not believe it, because it makes themselves stupid. Much more so because they study sometimes 5, 10 years. 10 sometimes. They get so many PhDs and other specifications, other categories for being stupid. But boy, they preach from those pulpits as if they were a person. And a person in the flesh. That's what they are teaching. But not a person in spirit. They are teaching fleshly junk. Doctrines of demons. This is what they are preaching and teaching. And then give them the analogy. Do you know what an orange is? You might be surprised. Some preachers may not understand what an orange is. So be sure of it before you begin to be biblical with a person from the Hebraic understanding. Then ask, do you know what an orange is? Then, obviously, then the person should say, yes, I know what an orange is. If you take a knife, you slice the orange in half. What do you have? 2 halves. Did you know that the Messiah came and he completed only half of the instructions and the prophets? And then waited for the response. And then he has to show you in the scriptures what he did. But then have in mind, he's going to explain to you in Greco-Roman understanding. And the Greco-Roman understanding, they were stupid. Because he came and he abolished the law. No, he did not abolish the law. What is that understanding from? Make sure then there is no law of the Shabbat or what to eat or the lunar view of every month. Those should not be ruling over you. No, he's speaking of the meats sold in the market. That's where the whole situation came from. It doesn't explain regarding then the first feast. Where do you get this first half of an orange? Speaking of then the meat in the market. We are speaking of meat, or are we speaking of an orange? Greco-Roman stupidity. We start our conversation with a half and a half of an orange. Why we're speaking of meat in the market? We are not heavy understanding. When Shaul was teaching and preaching, sometimes he would be in markets, and some of those meats, they were sacrificed in temples for demons. If you eat meat dedicated to demons, you are part of that demon. So then, if you know that the meat you are buying is from demon, don't buy the meat. And the meat Shaul is speaking of is the clean meat stated in a law. He is not talking about pork or shrimp or lobster or scavengers of the sea. Those, they eat trash. They are for the cleaning of the sand. Then, when he was speaking regarding these, there were also believers, new believers in the faith. And they were self-conscious of buying meat in the market. Much more coming up.